What is up, everybody? This is your fatherly host, Chew. And before we dive into this week's episode, I want to give a heartfelt appreciation to Tyler, my guest today, my buddy Jake, who was not able to be with us today, but did send in a voice message, which we'll hear in about a second. And all those people that listen to Father Dynasty, support it, give any feedback. And with this being 1 year removed from the first episode of Father Dynasty, I just want to say I appreciate all the support and looking forward to even another year of some fatherhood and some dynasty fantasy football. So enjoy Jake's message.
Happy birthday to Father Dynasty. Not the person, just the podcast, aka the Podfather. Chew, it's your boy Jake. I'm utterly devastated that I won't be able to join you and Tyler Daly on your 1 year anniversary. But I offer my sincerest congratulations because either my heartfelt message or my fartfelt message is that I've loved listening to your show over the last year. It's brought me a lot of joy. I enjoy the fatherly stories about your relationship with Finn and your relationship with your wife, Marlee. Some of the degenerative takes of your friends, including myself. Anyway, brother, I hate I can't make it, but I'm very, very proud of you. I appreciate everything you've done and everything that you're going to do. Talk soon.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of Father Dynasty. I am your celebratory host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little dynasty fantasy football. And this episode is a special one as we are 1 year removed from the first Father Dynasty episode, which it did only last 7 minutes, unlike myself. Since then, episodes have gotten both longer and stronger. And speaking of enhancement, joining me on this episode is the first timer for the interviews, the most frequent guest, and he's making his 9th appearance, and that is the most of any guest, a true titan of fatherhood and dynasty, Tyler Daly. How are you doing, buddy?
What an introduction. That'll make me feel better. I'm doing good. As you know, I've had COVID for the last few days. My wife had it before me, and now I'm getting over it. So just been hanging out. It's pretty much the most boring July 4th weekend of my life. We couldn't go anywhere. Did have a couple friends over who also had COVID. So we had a little COVID party on July 4th and just been smoking meats and already studying up on next year's Dynasty rookie class because my Phil Steele College Football Preview magazine came in. So did a lot of reading of that over the weekend and starting to highlight some of my favorite prospects already for next year.
I love it. And smoking meats is not a figure of speech, correct?
It is not. No, it's very, very literal.
Okay.
I have my drum smoker thanks to Uncle Sam for the tax return. I spent my tax return on that, and have just did a poor man's brisket with a chuck roast and did a big pork butt the day before that. So just honing my craft, much like previous guest on the podcast, Justin Fabiano.
Oh, he's a competition winner, or I think, as we clarified, he technically lost, but it was maybe a bit of nepotism, and I think he technically won it.
Yeah.
But
he's like Andy Bernard. He either wins competitions or he quits them because they're unfair.
Exactly. It's the wasp in him. So as the 46th episode, and of course a year later from the first episode being released, I thought we'd take a quick look back, and you of course being the first interview on the podcast and the most frequent guest, you might as well be the record keeper of the podcast, if you will. So what would you say is your favorite episode that you were not on? And I know there's only very few of them.
It was a pretty easy decision for me. It was the vasectisode. I thought that was really, really funny, especially because my wife likes to joke about the prospect of me getting snipped after our second kid. We constantly fight over this because I say we might go for 3 if we don't get a boy on number 2. I'm being told it's a hard stop at 2 and that I'm getting snipped. So getting some perspective from the vasectisode is something that I found both funny and also informative. So
Good deal. Yeah, it's I'm hoping that I can shed some light to any of those potential fathers out there. I guess you'd be not a potential father at that point to cut off the stream, but yeah, it wasn't too bad. I know that I'm probably one of the younger people to have ever gotten it done. Not a record, but probably pretty young. So yeah, when that time comes, let me know. That will be a very fun conversation. And what would you say is your fondest podcast memory? So that could be something that happened on an episode that you were on, or just something that happened within an episode, period.
I think this one will probably only connect with the two of us, but I did want to mention, it's a very insignificant moment, but for some reason I remember laughing really, really hard when there was one episode where we stumbled our way onto some Stealing Harvard quotes. And I think that might've been in like a Keep Trade Cut segment or something where that movie came up. And I hadn't thought about that movie in years. So that one really caught me. And then an episode I wasn't on, but I wanted to tip my cap to you a bit on was I was going back through the episode list in preparation for today, and the dad's guide to the birth apocalypse was also much appreciated, and I think will be an evergreen episode for you, because there will be hopefully some other viewers of this podcast who, obviously drawn in by the Father Dynasty element, are either first-time dads or second-time dads and would be interested and gain some perspective and benefiting information from that episode. So that was another personal favorite.
Appreciate it. And yeah, the Stealing Harvard, was there probably a mention of Gruyère's cheese?
Yeah, and then I think I need my cheese, and then it unraveled from there. We don't need to do that to your listeners again, but
yeah, that'll be, if I ever have a Patreon, it will just be nothing but Stealing Harvard and other nonsense. But and speaking maybe to a little bit of what you were saying was your fondest memory of the podcast thus far, what would you say, whether it be as a guest or as just a general enjoyer of the podcast, would you like to see more or less of?
I put down that I think I'd like to see some more of the going back through the episodes. Like I said, I was doing some more of the dad content. You know, we have been a lot more football focused lately, and I think it's just natural to be that way over this time of year, because we're so excited that we're actually getting real news and everything. But you're really funny when you're going into some of that stuff. I think you're funnier probably than you even give yourself credit for. So I know that there will be times that you go back to that, but that was what came to mind for me.
Noted. Y'all have to sit down with the notepad and figure out what fatherhood stuff I can do. And as my son has been providing, I don't want to say much content, probably just pure frustration, but I imagine I could probably channel that frustration into some sweet hot content. Well, now that we've taken a look back, but now let's jump to the now, and that's how we sneak right in here into Choose News.
Choose News.
So first up on Choose News, talking about rookie quarterbacks, and I would say draft capital does not lie, as it was a big shock, I'm sure, to most, seeing how far a lot of these rookie quarterbacks slipped. But what are you expecting out of this group in 2022? And just to kind of highlight a couple of news tidbits that have popped up, Kenny Pickett was receiving the third string reps in OTAs and mini camps, with Trubisky being this clear-cut number one. Malik Willis is set to sit behind Tannehill apparently the entirety of 2022 as he is developed and refined. And Mariota is apparently the clear starter in camp, far ahead, quote unquote, of Ritter. Although apparently Ritter has impressed Coach Smith from the neck up, whatever the hell that means. And Corral is unlikely to start week one. The plan is to have a veteran start, whether it be Darnold, whether it be Mayfield. I doubt they get Mayfield at this point, but who knows? But honestly, they've held pretty steadfast in terms of saying that Darnold is the guy. And McAdoo has kind of mentioned that with Corral adjusting from Ole Miss's offensive system to, I guess, a more pro-style system, that he doesn't anticipate that Corral would even really be ready to start but maybe at some point in 2022 get some playing time. So what do you think about this crop?
Yeah, so starting from the top, Kenny Pickett, I think we sent that link around in our group chat about him taking reps with the third team. Admittedly, blindly, without looking, I have no idea who the Steelers' second string quarterback is. Did you pick it up from the? Because is it still Mason Rudolph? There's no way Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, he's still there. Yep.
Oh, so Mason Rudolph is in front of Kenny Pickett. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yeah, because I know who was the long time. Was it Joshua Dobbs who used to be there? He's not there anymore. I know that, but
okay.
Yeah, so I know he's not there. Actually, I think he might be on the Browns, ironically enough.
And I'm sure
I'm pretty sure it's still Mason Rudolph.
I'm sure it's not that guy that they called Duck. He was the third stringer after Mason Rudolph got suspended for the Miles Garrett thing. Yeah, Duck Hodges. I'm sure he's not on there anymore either.
Yeah.
Surely he wouldn't be ahead of Kenny Pickett. But then again, I wouldn't think that of Mason Rudolph either. The third string QB thing, I mean, I think it would be really, really surprising and alarming if Kenny Pickett isn't the backup quarterback. I think we all knew that it was going to be a pretty open competition going into camp. And with this year's draft class at the quarterback position being what it is, I think we're more inclined, we all knew, to see most of these guys not be the outright starters right out the gate. Kenny Pickett potentially, with the highest draft capital, some would say that he was the most likely, but I'll get to actually who I think is the most likely candidate to start sooner later on in the next couple here. But I do expect to see Kenny Pickett obviously being the first round pick and Mitch Trubisky having some of the struggles that he's had. I looked at the Steelers' schedule though, and their first 8 games are pretty tough in my opinion. I think they play the Bills, the Bucks. I know they play the Eagles. Their bye week isn't until week 9. So I think the over-under for him should be at 9.5 because it's just going to depend on how they roll into, assuming a healthy Mitch Trubisky, it'll just be how they roll into that bye. Are they 4-4 and they still have hope at making a playoff race, or do they start like 2-6 and there's, let's throw Kenny Pickett out there. We've got Mitch Trubisky on if my memory serves me correctly, is on a very low guaranteed deal and very incentive laden. So if he doesn't play, it's not like a much skin off the Steelers' back. So that's kind of my. Do you want me to just roll into the rest of them, or
hit him up if you'd like? Yeah,
Malik Willis. I don't want to see him as a Titans fan because to me, if I see him, that's because the Titans either really suck this year or Ryan Tannehill is playing, or Ryan Tannehill's injured. And I don't want either of those things. I'm not saying I don't ever want to see Malik Willis, but I think you always hear the term luxury pick getting thrown out around draft time when teams pick a positional player they don't necessarily need. I truly think Malik Willis was kind of somewhat of a luxury pick because he just fell so much further than anybody would have anticipated. So I think the news tidbit that you read, I'm in lockstep with that. And then Desmond Ridder, I think he's the one that I put down. I thought we'll see the earliest. I joked around on several occasions on this podcast and call him mainland Mariota. And it is a little bit alarming for me to hear Arthur Smith say that he thinks that Mariota is really far ahead of Desmond Ridder, because that might more feed into your narrative of not liking Desmond Ridder, because we know who Marcus Mariota is at this point. And actually, no one knows Marcus Mariota better than Arthur Smith, because him being the offensive coordinator for the Titans, or I don't think he was the OC necessarily when Mariota was there, but I believe he was the quarterback's coach. So he knows him super well. But I just think that Mariota, we all know he has a very riddled injury history. So he's got bones like glass. He might be one of the first ones to go down from an injury, and we'll see Desmond Ridder, or the Falcons are going to suck this year. And so, in my opinion, why not see what you have with Ridder, the good, the bad, the ugly, because you're going to have a high draft pick. And if you find out that you have something with Desmond Ridder, they're going to be able to get a freaking king's ransom for like a top 3 or top 5 pick next year. This is the type of quarterback class next year. Like, I think back to trades like the Trey Lance trade, or years back like the Jared Goff and Carson Wentz trades, where the Titans nabbed like 6-7 picks for the number 1 overall pick because they didn't want to take a quarterback there. So I think it's in the best interest of the Falcons to play Desmond Ridder pretty early. And then Matt Corral, I think the Panthers just need to throw him out there, especially if they don't get Baker Mayfield, because like, is Matt Rule really going to go down with Sam Darnold? Like, is he going to go down with that ship? Like, can he sleep at night knowing that like that's what he rolled out there week in and week out? And maybe, what is it? Maybe like a 5 or 10% chance. Do you think that Sam Darnold actually turns it around at this point in his career? I think he probably kind of is who he is. I don't know if you have anything else on that.
Man, he's something. It seemed like, I know even now with his age, like considering how many years he's played in the NFL, he is still very young for an NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But considering the teams he's played for, and I'm a Panthers fan, so I'm agreeing with how the team is in shambles at this point, or at least very strong shambles. I don't know. That it's good that this is kind of something that maybe they should have done a year or two ago. Not got Matt Corral, but something like that could have been developed, because at this point, Matt Rule has lost every bit of credibility that he could have possibly had. And I know in that a lot of the stuff, like, just seeing on YouTube, like a lot of the behind the scenes of you hearing him talk like with his coaching group and hearing him talk to players and stuff, it all seems like not just for the cameras, like he sincerely seems like a good dude and just he means well and just kind of connects with the guys as much as he possibly can. But whether it's his fault, whether it's his staff's fault, whether Tepper is not the best owner and is maybe too controlling, entirely possible, then it's all just not working right now. And I mean, with Rule coming from college and his only, I think at the time, his only NFL experience was like it was like an O-line coach for the Giants or some sort of like assistant coach type thing for the Giants. That was the only thing. And I know he's brought his, Phil Snow, his D coordinator from college. He's tried to stay true to a lot of his guys. He brought in Robbie Anderson. That was a player that he had a number of other players too. But I think at a certain point he needs to, again, I don't think McAdoo's the solution, but I mean, it can't get much worse as it's gone. So what do you got?
Yeah. No, you said Ben McAdoo. Don't think he's a solution. I was like, oh, you don't? Like, we've just kind of gone in on McAdoo for a while on this podcast. So,
you know what? If he does incredibly well and makes Darnold into what everybody thought his ceiling could be when he got drafted out of USC, I will take every clip of us shitting on McAdoo and then just put clown faces over both of us. Like,
yeah.
That's how committed I am to the fact of I don't think that's going to happen. But
yeah, Sam Darnold, I think, unfortunately, has been kind of dead ever since the whole, I don't know, I think it was Monday Night Football where I'm seeing ghosts. And right or wrong, I just feel like I've never been able to get that out of my head about him. And I don't know if he's been able to get it out of his head because I feel like he's been seeing ghosts ever since.
Yeah, when he started so strong last year, again, a couple of games, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 games, was leading the league for quarterbacks and rushing touchdowns. A bizarre stat for Sam Darnold to have.
Sam Newton. That's what they're calling him in Carolina, Sam Newton.
I was waiting for the shirts to really catch on, but he didn't do it long enough for shirts to actually be made. I think once they actually shipped, they probably were burned once they were received because then he just reverted back to old Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm overall, though, very excited to see what actually happens with these rookie quarterbacks. It is pretty hilarious that despite everyone trying to pump all of them up, it is actually falling into place where what their draft capital is indicative of what the teams that drafted them actually think about them. And it doesn't mean they think they suck. It just means, I mean, if we could have waited a couple of rounds to get you, we probably have someone better already in tow, and we don't need to start you yet. So we'll see how that goes. But another thing, we'll see how it goes. A man who has not played a game in 535 days as of the recording of this podcast, Michael Thomas. What do we expect out of him, whether it be this year or in the near future? And he is reportedly running routes, so hold on.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on him. It's just been a really weird couple of years because he's just always, obviously the injuries, we all know what's been going on there, but there were even rumblings of him being disgruntled with the organization at times. And there was some rumors, I think, about fights in the locker room, but we never knew who that was with. And listen, I mean, the guy's 29 years old. We haven't really seen, to my recollection, him without Drew Brees in any level of substantial play volume. And we know how he thrived in that environment, and it was being a volume receiver. I mean, there were games where he was catching, numerous games a season where he was catching double-digit balls, and it was really, to my recollection, it was just Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara pretty much garnering most of the targets in New Orleans. And now we're looking at a receiver core that, with or without him, is still pretty good. With Chris Olave now entering the fold and Jarvis Landry in town, they've got some other options. We'll see what happens with Alvin Kamara and the suspension, but their new coaching regime, it's just a lot of unknowns for a receiver that's kind of, the window's closing just a little bit. So I don't know what his contract situation is without looking it up, but it almost has this feel to me like maybe we'll see a trade or something before the start of the season, because there's just a lot of times guys at that point in their career, there's that much newness. If I'll just make a word fit there, I just feel like he might benefit from a change of scenery. Is the way I feel.
Yeah, I know it's two guys actually in the same division, and they are not playing for two different reasons, with Calvin Ridley in Atlanta, of course, being suspended for gambling what is comparatively with what he makes a small amount of money. And Michael Thomas, of course, with his ankle injury that initially within the season that it happened, because he played 7 games in 2020 and hasn't played since January 17th of 2021. It seemed like you were saying, I hadn't heard the fighting in the locker room, but definitely they're just him being disgruntled with the team and how everything was going. And with now conceivably a healthy Jameis Winston, which is what they wanted in the first place, and they got a glimpse of last year, I think they can do pretty well. And even with the Kamara suspension, I know at that point it doesn't leave a great running back room, but I think the belief is they do have a very strong defense. And I think the offensive system, despite Sean Payton not being in town anymore, because I think he saw the writing on the wall with that one. Like you mentioned, the additions with Jarvis Landry and Chris Olave. And honestly, even before that, a very, I call it above average room in terms of Traquan Smith, who he's never done bad enough to be obviously kicked, like not re-signed, but never done like kind of reached that ceiling that it seems like everyone's thought that he could. Marcus Callaway, I mean, had a great preseason last year. And especially as you add more to the room, I think it gives him chances to just kind of like as a firework have boom bust games and that be completely okay with what he needs to do. And Deontay Harris, a guy that I've been big on, and I know I traded him in our Dynasty League last season as he had a couple of big games. But overall, yeah, really not a bad wide receiver room, and that's completely independent of Michael Thomas. So I kind of think we're getting to the point where they don't need him, whatever he is now, because I don't think that he is what he used to be 2-3 years ago. And I think if anyone's expecting that production again, they're gonna be very disappointed. But
yeah, let me ask you: would you be surprised with either of these outcomes? Like Michael Thomas catches, 95 balls and scores 5 touchdowns, has 1,300 yards, great fantasy season, or he's kind of in and out, maybe with some nagging injuries, or even not, and maybe he catches 60 balls for 800 yards and like 4 scores. Like I feel like he just has a very wide range of outcomes right now in the current situation. Now, if he goes somewhere else, I mean, who knows? To me, at this point, this is random. I didn't write this down or anything, but like this seems like a player that Bill Belichick would love to pick up and get in New England, because especially with either before Tom Brady, but now Mac Jones, like similar styles in what they want to do and how they want to distribute the football. Like a Michael Thomas type receiver is something that I think Bill Belichick would crush and give him like a second act.
I like that. I mean, there really is so much ambiguity with maybe where his headspace is at in terms of like, is it just in a whole different world? Is it more so because he's just kind of fed up with the organization, but they won't budge because, I mean, they're with their system of at the end of every season, them being so far over the cap. would that be a nail in the coffin of like, well, we can't get rid of you because we're going to trade you away, and how's that going to help us? There's so much dead cap sitting there that we'll be paying you 2 years once you're gone, and they're already having to deal with that with Breeze this season, and I think maybe a little bit the next season, and I think Terran Armstead, who's now in the Dolphins, obviously, so it could be everything kind of coming to a head with how they've handled the salary cap as of late, but I know they would certainly rather he be a guy in there that, like you were saying, two widely varied outcomes, but if they can get him producing, that's what they're paying him to do. So we'll see what happens. Now, jumping over to a backfield, what do you make of Buffalo's backfield with the reports that the Bills are, quote, firmly behind Singletary?
Did you see they followed that up? I'm sorry.
What did they say?
No, they followed it up with, they released a hype video.
Did they
I
really?
think either earlier today or the day before. But I saw your report, and they actually like cut together a Devin Singletary hype video. So they're openly propagandizing for Devin Singletary at this point.
Man, if they're putting advertising dollars towards him, that means something. Usually, it's a big whole thing when it's like, oh, there's like a banner or a pamphlet that they took a player off, so that means they're probably going to trade him. So if they're putting money into a hype video, that has to mean that they're going to give him a higher floor than necessary. But that's fantastic. But despite coming into the league, him being undersized and athletically pretty underwhelming in terms of the combine, he's kind of been a do-it-all guy. And at the tail end of last season, from week 15 on through their playoff exit against the Chiefs, he was a top 10 running back every single week in PPR. And it could have very well been a fluke. I know prior to week 15, it was nothing tremendous necessarily, but just kind of the whole portfolio of Singletary last year. And certainly if you think about once you make it into the playoffs, going in with some steam again from week 15 through week 18, if you're playing against playoff teams and you're still producing at a top 10 level at your position for fantasy, that has to mean something. And I don't just mean a Gabe Davis 50 burger. I mean, he did it week and week and week. So I think Zach Moss is out. It sounds like Duke Johnson is probably going to be there as just the depth veteran guy. Obviously, they drafted James Cook for a reason. He could be the pass catcher there. So what do you think about that backfield?
I'm very confused, and I feel like I change my mind on it constantly. I'm interested to hear what your opinion is on it. But, I think once they drafted James Cook, everyone just assumed, okay, Devin Singletary, 2-down guy, James Cook, 3rd-down back / passing situations. But if you really start to think about how the Bills run their offense and are constructed, I think it becomes harder to necessarily pin down because, everyone knows the Bills are one of the highest pass rate over expectation teams in the league. I mean, they're going to sling it. And everyone also knows their best goal line back is Josh Allen. And so usually what we're looking for from our running backs, especially if you're not a pass catching running back, is you can kind of compensate at least rationally for some of that if you're getting somebody who's going to get a lot of goal line carries. So if you're getting a plotter, Josh Jacobs, if you're high on the Oakland Raiders, Josh Jacobs isn't going to catch passes like we've seen for a couple of years. That's the truth. But if you believe in the Raiders offense and that they're going to be down by the goal line a lot, you can still get Josh Jacobs value because, somebody like, I think Damian Harris is a good example too. Like he scores, 13 touchdowns or something last year because the Patriots were down there a lot. I don't know if I have that right. So roast me if that number's way off, but you get where I'm going with that. And I think the Bills showed us though that they, in my mind, if you read the tea leaves, they showed us that they don't want Devin Singletary really catching passes because the thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is that they had a contract in place with J.D. McKissick earlier this offseason, and then McKissick backed out to take a deal to go back with the Commanders. And so you don't go out like that. That broadcasts the signal to me. It's like you don't go out and get J.D. McKissick to carry the ball. Like you get J.D. McKissick for passing down situations. So once you miss on J.D. McKissick in the free agency period, they go out and they draft James Cook. And so I think we just need to I like I told you, I'm overthinking it, but I think we need to see it in its simplest form. What have the Bills told us? And they went out, tried to get a pass down back, they missed, and so they drafted one. And so I think it's just gonna be a timeshare. But if either one of those guys goes down, James Cook's bigger than Devin Singletary, even though he's labeled as the pass catching back. He is physically a bigger running back. And so out of those two guys, either one of them probably could be a 3-down back if one goes down. And so I think I'm interested in both of those players from a fantasy perspective, because that offense is so enticing that we know odds are one of those guys isn't going to hold up to a 17-game workload, one or both of them. So you want to be part of that show.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree in terms of, when I looked at some of the stuff, with Singletary being, 5'7", he's a very compact guy, but again, 5'7" and athletically not really bursty. I don't know. It's kind of one of those guys where it's like he just gets the job done. You can't point to a certain specific athletic metric and say that's how he wins. I'm sure there is one out there that I don't know about because I'm not very savvy. But with him, and when I was looking at with Cook, I know that everyone was saying, he can be the pass catching back. And I was like, when I look at his stats, it's not like he was exclusively that in college, and he was able to do a bit of everything. So, and whether that be, just how the backfield was set up there. But I was always thinking about with Josh Allen taking so much of those red zone touches, again, whether they be him rushing it in or whether he be throwing it to likely a receiver or a tight end, again, with Dawson Knox getting a tremendous amount of touchdowns last year, versus him maybe tossing them to Singletary or Moss or whoever else. So I think, I don't know, I'm excited to see what happens, but when I was seeing last year, when Duke Johnson was able to step in and fill in admirably, I don't think it necessarily pointed to the fact that he's going to be the two, but it kind of pointed to, as long as they have people that can step in and kind of do a bit of everything, I think that's exactly what they need. And I'm not someone who has any shares or any what have you in the Buffalo backfield currently, but it kind of seems like it's one where if you had a little bit, you'd want to kind of capture the rest of it and see what you could get by the end of the season. Kind of like maybe like a San Fran in terms of you don't know how the season's going to start, but once you get a couple of weeks in, you maybe get a handle on who they feel the best about. Is Trey Sermon going to get kicked out and ignored for Elijah Mitchell? So, very curious to see how the Buffalo backfield shakes out. But bouncing back over to the wide receivers and someone who I think you like a little bit, as I know he's on your dynasty squad here, Rashod Bateman. So he did receive praise. Admittedly, that was as vague as the news was, what I was reading on, I think it was Roto-Baller there. But I don't even know who the praise was from a coach, a player, I'm not really sure. But do you think, does he slide into top 20 PPR as Baltimore's number one pass catcher? And that may be as number one pass catcher over Mark Andrews. And realistically, even if he's number two to Mark Andrews, do we think that he can be a top 20 guy, or where do you see his range of outcomes for this year?
So I think by the time, from a redraft perspective, I think by the time that we get to quote unquote prime drafting season, like the month of August into late August, early September, right before the season starts, I think people will take Rashod Bateman in the top 20. I think that's what you're going to have to pay to get him, because the Ravens are going to show people, everyone who's involved in the fantasy football community right now obviously knows how good Bateman's going to be, but the rest of the world is going to wake up to it a bit too and realize, like, look at the Ravens depth chart and recognize that the only name that they know is Rashod Bateman and Mark Andrews. So I think he will get drafted there. I'm actually it's getting now to the point where I feel like I'm a little bearish on him based on where expectations have gotten a little too high for me. So to build on that point, this is the piece of trivia that I titillated you with earlier. So I wanted to ask you, prior to 2001, so in 2001, both Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown both went over 1,000 yards receiving for Baltimore. Prior to that season, who had the last 1,000-yard receiving year for the 1,000-yard receiving season for the Ravens?
Anquan Bolden.
It's a good guess. It's not Anquan Bolden. We'll mention Jake because he was unable to join us tonight due to academic purposes, but he guessed Steve Smith as well.
He did. I don't think he had a great season when he played there.
It was not Steve Smith.
Yeah.
It was Mike Wallace in 2016.
Really?
So
is that where he signed after the Steelers? Was that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think he went to the Dolphins afterwards. But anyhow, Steve Smith did have a 1,000-yard season for the Ravens. I think it was in 2014.
Okay.
And there's actually only one. This will be my last Ravens receiving tidbit here, but there's actually only one player in franchise history who has notched over a single 1,000-yard receiving season for the Ravens, and it's Derek Mason. So that's all my Baltimore receiving facts. But the reason I was looking that up was because I was sitting there thinking about this Rashod Bateman hype and everything, and I do want to be excited about him because he's on my dynasty team, and I am excited about him. But the Ravens just don't operate that way, that they're going to support, this massive workload for a lot of guys. The established rapport is there between Mark Andrews, who set the franchise record for receiving yards last year in Baltimore, with him and Lamar Jackson. That rapport is there. We know Mark Andrews is just always going to be on the field because of how run heavy they are. And now they also introduce Isaiah Likely and Kohler, and they just have all these pretty good pass catching pieces to where, yes, Rashod Bateman is by far the most elite receiver from a talent perspective, but again, back to my point, believe what the organization is showing you. The Ravens spend a first round pick revamping, getting a top tier center. They're always investing in the offensive line. They get potentially the best tight end room now in the league. I mean, 3 deep guys that are probably startable anywhere in the league. And so they're going to put heavy personnel on there. Gus Edwards is healthy. J.K. Dobbins, although it sounds like his rehab might not be going totally to plan, probably going to be healthy by the start of the year. I think they made a concerted effort last year to try to throw a little bit more, and it didn't translate for them. I mean, they missed the playoffs and weren't super competitive in the division. I know Lamar was nicked up for some of that time, but I'm tempering my expectations a little bit because I think the Rashod Bateman hype has gone a little too high.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And looking with the Ravens they were 10th in targets last year, which is pretty wild to think about considering how they traditionally have operated with Lamar Jackson. I know he wasn't healthy all of last season, but even when you had Tyler Huntley in there, he is very much in the mold of Lamar Jackson. And with Hollywood Brown, he led the team with 146 targets, and they were confident enough with their player that they gave 146 targets to trade him to a different team. And I understand there could have been the politics and the contracts talks, but they at least felt good enough to send him out of there. And Bateman in 12 games had 68 targets. So even under the assumption that he falls somewhere in the middle of, 100, 110 targets maybe, they were the team that had the highest percentage of targets going to the tight end, like you mentioned with Andrews doing so well. They had about 29% of their targets going to the tight end. So I don't see that changing tremendously, or I at least see them still being in the top 5, top 10 in terms of percentage of targets going to the tight end. But I think it really depends on with Bateman, if they're trying to commit back more to the run, like you mentioned with the running backs that they're going to have hopefully healthier. And I did like their drafting of Tyler Batty. Mm-hmm. But if Bateman's, if he's got 100-ish targets, it really might just depend on his red zone usage and what touchdowns he can pull in. He can maybe creep into that top 20, but I really don't see it being any better than like top 15, top 17. It's really going to be quite on the end of top 20 there. But the story's there and it just looks so good. I remember him coming out of college and him being hyped up so much. And it was kind of a thing being like, oh, we went to the Ravens. Like they don't throw the ball. It's Lamar Jackson, but
he
doesn't have a better chance.
They really have. I mean, that's an excellent point. They really have cleared the path for him. And that's a great point to make about, trading Hollywood Brown, because we know he's a talented receiver. And so most people, I think, were excited about Bateman because he is almost one of those situations where he's going to now the attention is spread a bit thinner because you have talent like Andrews and Brown. So that's a good point.
Well, I think we've covered a good amount, and I think that will do it for Choose News.
Choose News.
So next up, we've got a Roast Me or Toast Me, and since this is the 1 year birthday of Father Dynasty, we'll make it a double feature. So the first one here is you, me, you. Tyler, a trade between you and myself. And Tyler, you got Zamir White, Terrace Marshall, and a 2023 fifth. And I got Chris Carson in a scoliosis back brace, a 2023 third rounder, a 2023 fourth rounder, and then a 2024 third rounder. So obviously this is you and I picking or trading back and forth. So what were your thoughts in terms of trying to bring in some prospects and throwing some darts at those guys? Or
yeah, in terms of labeling it a roast or a toast, I think I put that I think I'm probably more on the side of getting roasted, and I think that's more so for my targeting of Terrace Marshall. And then, you're probably getting toasted because a lot of people have already just punted on Terrace and thinking that based on what they saw last year or didn't see last year that he's done. So it's like I told you in the group chat when I was kind of defending myself to Jake and I don't think necessarily you were trying to roast me or anything, but I don't know if I'm sold that Terrace Marshall is as dead as everybody thinks he is. And so, he has a second round draft capital to his name. I know that I run the risk of the coaching regime change impending, but I think there's a real opportunity for him to see some meaningful looks this year. And especially, I think the kind of weird stuff going on with Robbie Anderson talking about retiring and then that just all of a sudden going away. I was also watching some clips where he was from last year where he was just so visibly pissed off that Sam Darnold was throwing him the ball and just missing and he just had the look of of a guy who just didn't want to be there. And then I'm looking at the rest of the Panthers depth chart and what is that? Zylstra? And is that how you say
Brandon Zylstra.
Name?
Hey.
Yeah,
oh yeah.
I don't mean to disparage the name of Zylstra, but there's just
he's a Brandon Burson of today.
It's DJ Moore. It's DJ Moore, it's Robbie Anderson, and then Terrace Marshall. So if you were to take Robbie out of the equation, theoretically, and even if not, 3 wide receiver sets, Terrace Marshall should be on the field if healthy this year. So taking a shot on him, and then people that listen to this podcast pre-draft know, anyone who probably talks to me about football knows that I was pretty high on Zamir White coming into the draft. And especially after the Raiders didn't pick up Josh Jacobs' 5th-year option, I wanted to try to Nostradamus a little bit and maybe see if I could strike gold and catch their next starting running back. So a position that I'm a little thin at on Dynasty. So what were your thoughts on that one?
Honestly, it was a tough one when I saw it because, as you know, the state of my team, it's pretty fragile in the sense of not necessarily I have all players that have bones like glass, but it's top heavy in the sense of if I have 2 ACL tears in my starting lineup, that's it. The depth is almost non-existent at almost any position at this point. And how I was looking at it, Zamir White, it's a guy I liked a lot. Where I had gotten him in the draft, in our rookie draft, I was beyond excited. And that might have been before the Josh Jacobs news. I don't remember. But I was just very excited at the prospect of what that running back room was going to look like. I know it's going to be, is it he, Brandon Bolden, Abdullah, Josh Jacobs, obviously. So
Kenyon
I kind of thought that
still
he
on
could
the roster. I don't know if he'll make the team or not.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean,
he could be a cut candidate.
I kind of thought very much so. I mean, I kind of thought I think I got him at the 501, I want to say. And I kind of just saw it as well, I don't love taking late round running back darts in terms of how are they really going to see the field. But with him, I was like, I don't know why he doesn't see the field at some point, especially given that if we're going to believe that if it's a Josh McDaniels system where it's just going to be kind of revolving door running back based on what he feels like that specific day. I know I thought it was really funny getting them getting Brandon Bolden, because I remember he was the guy that would just wreck people. Like, he would be the first running back, like the first two runs for the game. He would just come in and he would just be like for the whole run. It didn't make any sense to me at all why he would be the one that would come out over James White, a healthy James White, or any of those other guys. But I'm curious to see what that backfield shakes out to be. And for Terrace Marshall, I do still believe in him. The Robbie Anderson extension that he ended up getting, I was mildly furious when that happened, because I don't think he deserved it, in my opinion. And I don't know if that was a bit of loyalty to his coach having some loyalty with him being an old Temple guy, but I don't think he did enough to earn it. And I really thought that Terrace Marshall was going to be the guy coming in and could truly be alongside DJ Moore, and at the end, get some other wide receiver 3 to come in, which I know they got Rashard Higgins from the Browns in the offseason. But I don't know. He had a big preseason last year, and I know preseason darlings don't mean nearly anything for the regular season. Tell that to me loving Jarrett Patterson. But I think he can be something still. I don't think it's necessarily that he's written off. And the quarterback play is not going to help him at all. Obviously, Robbie Anderson being pissed that Darnold was missing him repeatedly last year. I assume every receiver is pissed that Sam Darnold was missing him a lot last year. But I guess I kind of see it as like, I think I got Terrace Marshall in the second of our rookie draft in that year. So it's a couple of third-round darts coming over to me, and Chris Carson, I assume he's going to retire because of the medical reasons with his neck. But God forbid if he ends up playing again, he's got maybe another season, because he's already, I think, 27 or 28 as a bruising back with a neck fusion surgery. So just a guy to have on my roster until I'll probably drop him in August. So I thought it was a good one for the both of us in terms of what we both kind of saw out of that and what we wanted to get. So
yeah, I agree.
But now this is one that does not involve you, so we can get a real roaster toast here. So this is one between fellow Dynasty Daddy Jake and I. So Jake got T. Higgins, a 2023 third, and a 2025 fourth, and I got the almost retired, because he's an old man, Adam Thielen, a 2023 second, 2024 second, and a 2024 third. And before I get your roast or toast, because as I kind of concocted this, and I was like, if I'm not getting some bit of a first or some reasonable stud for T. Higgins, as I know his value is inflated to the point where he's basically the best number 2 that the NFL has to offer, and he's only, 23 years old. I kind of saw it as Adam Thielen being 30-31. I want to say he'll probably have some negative touchdown regression, but his big thing is he's the red zone guy. He's now in an offense with a Rams coordinator coming over and probably committing back more to the pass. And even with Justin Jefferson in tow and KJ Osborne being KJ Osborne, I don't see how in the next, maybe this year, maybe the next year, that he regresses so terribly to where he's not worth on or around what T. Higgins is producing just on a year-to-year basis. Although I know T. Higgins being just under a decade younger than him, he will be doing it for much, much longer. And the hope was that if I'm stepping up in 2023, one full round, because they're both your picks, and in 2024, just getting a second flat out, and in 2025, getting him a fourth. But yeah, a lot of just shifting and moving versus, hey, can I get Adam Thielen in a first? Because I didn't think that was going to happen. But what do you think?
Did you ask for Adam Thielen in a first?
Either I did, or it was some version of like Adam Thielen a first, T. Higgins and something else, and it probably was a bigger version than that. But the main focus would have been that, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually just wrote down that I wanted to get what your thoughts were. So you kind of explained that on the front end, because I think in a vacuum, most people would roast you for that trade, and I think you touched on why, and that's because T. Higgins is one of the hottest names in the fantasy football community right now, especially the dynasty community, because young quarterback, young top 2 wide receiver duo. We just saw the team go to the Super Bowl. The arrow couldn't be any higher. But I think that Adam Thielen, like you mentioned, is a player that is capable of playing at that level that he's currently at least for a couple more years. Especially getting another target. I know he's had the benefit of playing with a lot of elite wide receiver talent over his career in Minnesota, and now he's got Justin Jefferson taken over, and I'm a Irv Smith guy, so maybe they'll get some more help from a receiving tight end. I mean, they have a Rams disciple now running the offense, so I think it's still a roast for me because I think that you maybe could have gotten more from T. Higgins, but I go back and forth on how I value dynasty draft picks, but as you know, my cutoff is kind of the third round. Me personally, I look back at my history from drafting after the third round, and it is horrendous. And so you get 2 second-round picks, so you're inside my cutoff there. So I think once you parse through it a little bit more, it's not as bad as some might look. And I actually, real quick, want to go back and apologize for roasting. I don't even know if I roasted you to your face. I may have just roasted you behind your back about the Deshaun Watson trade with Michael Laughlin. And that is a cold take now. I think I told Jake, I was like, what is Chew doing? Like he's shipping off Deshaun Watson, like right when he's about to get back on the field in like a better situation. And now it's like, you couldn't have moved Watson. It's not that we assume that his career's not over, so he's not like dead, but you wouldn't have been able to get that trade today, I don't think. So
no, it was one where I didn't necessarily, obviously, what has happened since I made the trade. I did not think that was going to happen by any means, but it kind of seemed like with how everything was structured with the contract, they kept talking like, all right, well, he's only got like his salary itself is only like $1 million or $2 million or something. So it's like, all right, well, the agent must understand that, he's probably, they might suspend him regardless of what happens with these cases. And with all the stuff still sitting out there, it's like, well, if he hasn't settled the civil cases, which this was before additional ones had come on, he either has just that blind confidence that like, I'm going to get this right and it's going to work out, or he's, I guess, being stubborn or whatever it is and hasn't settled them, but he should. He, of course, being settling a couple, but I guess those 4 or 5 or so was what the NFL were focused on. And last week was when they were working on their investigation, so, and the hearings and such. So I
right.
guess this week or maybe next week, I guess, is when the actual official suspension and everything comes out. So we'll see what happens. I don't see how he ends up not getting a single bit of a suspension. I don't know that was even in the cards at all based on what the media reports were saying, but yeah, it was funny because after I did it, I assumed he was going to maybe be suspended a little bit, but I was like, that didn't feel like enough. It's like, I like Tannehill. I like Penny enough. That was actually, I guess, before they drafted Kenneth Walker. So then they drafted him, and I'm not super high on Kenneth Walker, but I mean, I think it'll be a 2-headed monster because they're just going to run the air out of the ball there. But it was one where it was bittersweet to get rid of Watson, thinking that it was going to be, I got him at his lowest and I was going to get him when he came back. He was already set to play. He was cleared. He was going to be the top 5 quarterback that everybody knows he is. And he still wasn't definitively that when I traded him. It was still very murky. So realistically, if I would have held on to him thinking that he could have been cleared of everything, 0 suspension, he's going to play with Amari Cooper and David Njoku and all these guys, I probably would have been very disappointed if I didn't take that deal. If this would have happened, and I would have been like, well, I don't think I can get, Rashod Penny and Tannehill and all these guys for him. So yeah, feel a little bit of breathing room there, but well, that is a roast me or toast me. And just before we squeak out of here, I do want to give a huge thanks to you, Tyler. Again, 9th time coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And not just your guesting on the show, but just your overall support. I sincerely appreciate it. I know Jake could not be on the episode as he is getting educated, but I appreciate his kind words, as you would have heard before this episode. And all those Dynasty Daddies, I really appreciate the support, listening, and certainly any interaction with me on Twitter, Instagram, any of that sort of thing, and enjoying what you hear and let me know what you want more of. So as the guest, Tyler, you get the last word, and I would love to hear what you have to say.
So my last word is just, I'm going to plug my wife, which I feel like I've done at least 30 to 40% of the time that I have been on this show, but she wanted me to remind you that she's still keeping an eye out for the special episode of Mama Dynasty, where her and or Marlee get on here. But Megan, in particular, is wanting to discuss, is very on brand for her, wants to discuss SEC NFL talent that's coming into the NFL. So maybe at some point this season, we work in in our way too early preview of next year's Dynasty draft class, we can talk about some SEC rookies because her college football knowledge kind of lives and dies with the SEC. So that would be her particular area of expertise that she would like to have the Mama Dynasty episode, at least, if not centered around, at least geared towards.
Well, you can tell Mrs. Daly, one, that can absolutely happen. And if what she's saying also is that she wants to have one with just she and Marlee and we get the hell out, I'd be very curious to see how that one goes. I'd be very excited to see how loose-lipped they both get.
Just pull that pin, throw the grenade, and run out. That could get wild.
Well, there's no question. And as I know she's a huge football fan, as you're saying, SEC as well. So I'd be very excited to hear her knowledge on here. And we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Looking forward to number 10 already.
And, cheers to that. See you, brother.